Thank you. Thank you for having me and my family here in your wonderful country. Obviously, I was young when I came, so I didn't have to experience everything that my parents did. But for me, as I became acquainted with AB 329 a year ago, I was shocked at what it contains and what it took for the organizations that put this in place. So I want to give you a picture of what has been taking place. Now, Mark was talking about how we got here over the course of 400 years. I want to give you a context and the vision behind sex education. And so I'm going to show you 3 tweets from various organizations to see what they think about it. The first one is from CSE. It was a tweet back in January of this year. CSE stands for the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States. They say that sex ed is a vehicle for social change. We need to prioritize educating young people about all of these concepts early on. Sex education is a golden opportunity to teach youth about dismantling systems of power and oppression that perpetuate white supremacy, homophobia, transphobia, and more. Next one is from CSE jointly together with Planned Parenthood. They put out a 2-page PDF on Planned Parenthood's website, September of last year. They said, if you care about abortion rights, then you should care about sex education. And the third one comes from GELSON, the Gay, Lesbian, Straight Education Network. Why heteronormativity is a bad thing. I don't know about you, but I've never heard this word, even though I have a master's. What is heteronormativity? Well, let's explore. They put a link in their tweet to Teen Vogue, a magazine that is meant to be read by 13 to 17-year-old, especially girls. It's about time we kicked heteronormativity to the curb. Never heard of the term before? It's the idea that binary gender identity and heterosexual orientation, meaning there are only 2 sexual orientations and genders, are the norm. This was September 1st, 2016. Shocking. So now as we explore what the law says and the necessary steps from the legislature to the State Department of Education and down to our school districts, I want you to keep that context in mind, because as we read the law and as we'll read sections of the law, you'll say, where in the world is this? I don't see it, George. But this is what they mean. So what do they mean by all of this stuff? Well, they have redefined the terms. The term is no longer sex ed, but it's comprehensive sexuality education. Comprehensive as if what we received before was limited. Sexuality, because that is a key term that has been redefined, and I call it indoctrination versus education. What is this key word mean? Back in 2006, the World Health Organization defined it as a central aspect of being human throughout life encompasses sex, gender identities, roles, sexual orientation, eroticism, pleasure, intimacy, reproduction. That's a coined term for abortion. Thoughts, fantasies, desires, beliefs, attitudes, values, behaviors. Sexuality encompasses all of this. So what happened is in 2006, in May, the International Planned Parenthood Federation, the parent arm of Planned Parenthood all throughout the world, they came out with a framework for comprehensive sexuality education. In 2006, where were we? Why didn't we know? And they said comprehensive sexuality education must encompass gender, pleasure, diversity, HIV, violence, and another important term, sexual rights. Because 2 years later, in 2008 of May, they came out with another report on sexual rights, a declaration of sexual rights that says a man's or a woman's sexual rights includes the right to an abortion, the right to consent, the right to be to sexual orientation and of their choice or gender identity, the right to CSE, comprehensive sexuality education, and so much more. There are 10 articles of sexual rights. Why this term is important? Because this declaration equates sexual rights to human rights, which then equates it to civil rights. Now, in the United States of America, we have the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So without ever having to change a law, they have redefined the key terms in existing law to include whatever it is they want it to be. Sexuality and sexual rights. So now, as we're going to investigate the law, whenever you hear the word sexuality, sex, gender identity, sexual rights, this is what they mean. And these are the basic documents that display their principles. The other thing that they like doing is they like to use these fancy, big, broad organizations to hide behind them to give them credibility. So these organizations, such as UNESCO, which is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization, in September of 2018 published the International Technical Guidance on Sexuality Education, as if the entire world needs something like this. My parents did fine without it and had 12 kids. And we were in a town of 300 people, never received sex ed, all right? Here's an interesting excerpt from the conclusion that they draw, because one of the other things about implementing sex ed in schools is about lowering HIV and STIs and also lowering teen pregnancies. So as you implement a comprehensive sexuality education curriculum, they have to start tracking. Is it working? Is it not? And so CSE has been first implemented at the international level in other countries, especially in Europe, who is far more progressive. So these guidelines, if you could put them right back, I'll read the quote right now that says, "It is difficult to draw strong conclusions about the impact of CSE on biological outcomes, such as STIs or HIV rates, as there are still relatively few high-quality trials available, particularly those that take a longitudinal approach." You're telling me that the world's most respected organization that took the time to set up the International Sexuality Guidelines in September 2018, 3 years after the California Healthy Youth Act was enacted, they're telling us it doesn't work and that they have no proof for it. Are you kidding me? Now that is a reckless public policy. Governor Brown, Governor Newsom, how can we enact a public policy for 6.2 million children, and yet the organization that promotes this is saying they do not have the evidence to back it up? Then from the international level, they come down to the national level, and they develop the national sexuality education standards here in America. They try to make it sound as if this is some kind of government entity, it's credible, and yet it has nothing to do with any of our government agencies. They are part of a nonprofit organization called the Future of Sex Ed that is made up of advocates for youth, Answer, and SECUS. And SECUS and a couple of the other organizations that I will name over and over and over will rear their ugly heads everywhere we go on this journey. But I really want to caution you, when you read things like this, these are not federal mandates, they are not federally approved resources, guidelines, it's just them putting nice terms to make you think such. One of the authors and reviewers of the National Sexuality Education Guidelines went and became part of the CDC, because this is the other thing. You want credibility? Well, infiltrate those government and public organizations that have a lot of say in this. The CDC is the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, a well-respected entity in the United States. They developed in 2016 their own guidelines now for comprehensive sexuality education by using the help of none other but CSE. So now it gives them credibility because CSE can go and say, well, the CDC says so. So now with this understanding, let's come back to the California Healthy Youth Act. How it was implemented from the legislature to the Department of Education to the curriculum, and then we'll look at its key objectives and mandates. Assemblymember Shirley Weber was the lady that authored this bill with the support of the California Teachers Association, that's the teachers union here in California, the California School Board Association, the California PTA. Yes, the California PTA is a political organization. Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, in Romania we call them the American Communist Lawyers Union, Latinas for Reproductive Justice, and Equality California. So at the Department of Education, they have 6 commissions, and one of those commissions is the Instructional Quality Commission, and they deal with curricula and with frameworks. And on this 18-member commission, they now had their homework cut out for them because the law passed in 2015. So in 2016, they started working on this framework. It lasted from 2016 all the way till next month, May 8th and 9th at the full CDE board meeting in Sacramento. They are scheduled to ratify the health framework. So you go from the legislature, which passes the law, and you take it to the State Department of Education that has to interpret that law and provide guidance for the school districts. In this process, there were 2 periods of public input, each 60-day periods. With Informed Parents of California, we spearheaded an effort to raise awareness about this public process and get parents to submit comments. The first round last year in the summer, we submitted over 600 comments. Second round between November and January of this year, we submitted over 2,000 comments. In March 28th, we went to the IQC with over 200 parents speaking in opposition to the health framework, and none of our comments were taken seriously or addressed. So I want to give you a flavor for how this health framework, what it says. It has chapters, and these chapters are broken down by age categories. But in over 1,000-page document, you only see the word abstinence twice, while the word sex, I stopped at 100. It's just way over 100. From TK through 3rd grade, there's a quote here saying that teachers can introduce the concept that gender does not always match the sexual and reproductive organs described. We're talking about 4-year-olds to 8, 9-year-olds? We need to talk about this? Are you serious? 4th through 6th grade, they tell teachers to challenge binary concepts about gender. We're talking about adults whom our kids are supposed to respect, 10 to 12-year-olds. Are they going to question when a teacher is challenging them on their concepts of gender? That's what the Department of Education wants our teachers to do. In junior high, they say that examples for spiritual abuse include using religion to justify abuse, insisting on rigid gender roles. Since when has the state of California become the Church of California? Spiritual abuse? I thought God doesn't exist. So why do they even have to define what spiritual abuse means? 9th through 12th grade, the usage of LGBTQ+ throughout this document is intended to represent an inclusive and ever-changing spectrum. That means genders are infinite. There is no limit to them. They also include a portion here that they need to teach students the right to excuse themselves from campus to obtain confidential medical services without parental permission or notification. They want your children to know that. that a student can go and have an abortion during school hours without parents being notified. They can come right back in at 2 o'clock, slip out the door at 2:30. Nobody knows a thing. The curriculum. So once it goes from the legislature to the State Department of Education, you saw the guidance or the type of guidance they're providing, because we have quotes like that over and over. But now the school districts have to develop a curriculum. Well, at the state level, this curriculum has to be approved, and it's approved by a quasi-state agency called ASHWAG. ASHWAG stands for Adolescent Sexual Health Work Group. And the two main entities on the government organization side are the State Department of Education and the State Department of Health Services. On the other side, you see non-governmental organizations. And these are, nonprofit entities. Some of them, which I highlighted there, are actual companies that provide sex ed curriculum. So they get to sit on the board reviewing their own submittals to ASHWAG that will later then get approved. There are 5 middle school curriculums approved at the state level and 6 for high school. And I provide you with this very interesting screenshot from ASHWAG's analysis of each of these curriculums. And if you look at the top, it says 2016 ASHWAG Ad Hoc Curriculum Review Group. It took the State Department of Education from 2016 to 2019 just to develop a framework. And usually the framework is then used by the curriculum providers so they can go and update their books. And yet these private organizations in 2016, not only did they already have their curriculum written, but it was submitted and ASHWAG already completed the review. Now, I work in a big organization. We don't move fast. It takes a long time to do this. So that tells me these organizations were moving in 2014, 2015. This is a big collusion that has been going on between the state, the legislature, the Board of Education, Planned Parenthood, ACLU, you name it. And I give you an example here from one of the curriculums, Positive Prevention Plus. And one of the footnotes on the bottom left, they cite their source as the California Health Framework 2018. Little do they know that that has not even been finalized. The proper source should be Draft Health Framework. They're insinuating a finalization of the framework before it even passed. So let's look at the actual content of the law. It's a little bit longer. It's broken into 4 articles, so I'll go through this a little quicker. It has 5 major objectives, and I'm highlighting key words in these objectives. Sexuality, gender, sexual orientation. You see how those words are in there, but nowhere do they go into the depth that the framework or those international guiding documents talk about. Comprehensive, unbiased. Under section 51932, this is a very important section because it talks about the fact that you cannot opt out of any studies that deal with gender, gender identity, gender expression, or sexual orientation. So your child can be in a health class that you opted them out from, you thought you signed everything, but if they talk about sexual orientation or gender identity in another place and not in the health class, you can't opt them out of that. Section 51933 gives some stipulations that the California Healthy Youth Act must be age appropriate, must be medically accurate. And it also says that the instruction and materials shall not reflect or promote bias against any person on the basis of any category that's protected under Ed Code 220. When you go to Ed Code 220, it includes a long list of protected classes, which includes religion. Yet when you read all of the curriculum that has been developed, they are very in-your-face anti-religion. It also says in section D5 that the instruction and materials shall affirmatively recognize that people have different sexual orientations. So if we are to talk about statistics that somehow stigmatize the LGBT community, even though that's the truth, we can't. Teachers can't. The curriculum shall not. It always has to be in a very affirmative manner. Further, it talks about that the curriculum needs to explore the harm of negative gender stereotypes. And in section H, talks about that it must include negotiation and refusal skills. This means consent. In the state of California, the consent laws are pretty clear. Over 18. Why do we need to teach K through 12th grade consent when we don't even need to bring that up? It's clear what the law is. Yet, obviously, they're getting in through the back door because teens with teens can. So they're saying, but we need to teach them these healthy skills of negotiation and refusal. It's sickening. And then lastly, in section I, it says, it may not teach or promote religious doctrine. Section 51934 states that each pupil must receive this once in junior high and once in high school. And section 8 talks again about the confidential medical services, i.e. abortion. It explains here in 51934, section 9, emergency contraceptive, morning after pill, and under sub-bullet A, it says parenting, adoption, and abortion. The curriculum cannot avoid this topic. It must address it. Further on, it says that it's not just mandated for junior high and high school, but now it may be used earlier than 7th grade. So now if you have an activist superintendent, principal, school teacher who really wants to teach all of this in kindergarten through 6th grade, they can. Unless that school district enacts a board policy that says we shall not, they can. They have the green light. 51936 say that the school district may contract with outside consultants. Well, who are these consultants that know what comprehensive sexuality means and that are certified in teaching comprehensive sexuality? It's not our grandparents, not our parents. It's CSE, it's Gelson, it's Planned Parenthood. 51938 talks about opt-out. The law changed from what was in the past an opt-in, and it's interestingly worded. You think that if it's opt-in, right, it means something, and opt-out means another. So opt-in means that you get a form home. If you don't see that form, if you don't sign that form as a parent, and your child goes to school without that form, and they start teaching that in class, out you go, student. You're not allowed to be here. Opt-out means that if you get a form, if you don't see that form, if you don't sign that form, or even if you do and your child takes it to school but never gives it to the teacher so nobody saw it, your child stays in the class and receives the instruction. So this is another way that they get around. If you read CSE's 2018 legislative report, they talk about what their stance is on the opt-in policy. And the opt-in policy says is it has to be an opt-out because you are intruding on the right of a student to receive comprehensive sexuality education. Students have right over their parents. So how is CSE being rolled out? Well, depending on a liberal or conservative district that you're in, I want you to know that the ACLU has sent letters to all 1,000 school districts in California, and the school districts that are getting rowdy, like mine about it, they have sent representatives to the school board meetings, but it's time to fight back. We need to form teams at the district level and at the state level, and you'll hear a little bit more about that. And I call it the parental revolution. So parents, thank you for being here. God bless you.